Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns, the podcast where we look at film franchises and then pitch our own ideas for sequels. This week, we delve far too deeply into our personal lives in order to disassemble 50 Shades of Grey. Based on the book of the same name, 50 Shades of Grey is ostensibly about a dominant submissive relationship between a rich douchebag and a timid student. What it's actually saying, however, is somewhat more open to interpretation. A woman's midlife crisis on the page? A talented director's attempt to polish a turd? An allegory for an independent woman fighting against an oppressive patriarchy? Just how deep is the subconscious message of 50 Shades of Grey, and how deliberate is it? Find out right here, right now. This episode contains spoilers for 50 Shades of Grey, Magnolia, Frasier, and our upcoming lawsuit with Kelsey Grammer. Enjoy! Hello, welcome to Diminishing Returns. I'm Alan, I'm here with Saul.
Hey, hey.
I'm Calvin.
Hello.
This week we are discussing fan fiction turned multi-million dollar film franchise 50 Shades of Grey in what is probably one of the most remarkable stories of a story coming to film, I think. Really bizarre. Perhaps a sign of things to come. Will we see more bullshit writers coming to the forefront because of the internet?
Was it the internet, though? Like, before we get into talking about the movie, maybe we should just talk a little bit about... Obviously, this movie is based on a book, 50 Shades of Grey, which came out in, was it 2012? Something like that? And it was born out of... I mean, everyone knows this story, but it was born out of a middle-aged housewife's Twilight fanfiction that she was posting online, and then she changed some names around and somehow got a book deal, and here we are. It got published and was a bestseller.
You know that she is generally referred to as a middle-aged housewife. But, but I looked into it, and do you realise she was head of production on Room 101, Have I Got News For You, and a selection of other TV shows.
Oh, whoa, I had no idea.
So she obviously has some media
savvy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly,
wow.
But no one ever mentions that.
Huh.
It's really odd.
I mean, I don't know anything about her, to be honest with you. I mean, anyone who writes fan fiction, if you're older than 15, then you've probably got some serious problems. But
I mean, that's basically what we do every week on this podcast, don't you?
Well, I don't know. Okay, anyone who writes fan fiction to wait a minute, I was going to say anyone who writes fan fiction to fuel their own sexual desires, but that's what I'm doing this week. So.
Yeah, you've already done that on the show as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back. Okay, I respect her. But we don't genuinely intend any of this to be taken too seriously, and we certainly don't write it out in full novel form. Like, what has anybody read the book? Well, I know a lot of people have, but is it well written, or is
no?
it...
I've read a vast selection of hilarious quotes from the book, but I haven't read the whole thing. Calvin, what was that like?
Oh, it's dreadful. I did get just swept up in the hype back in 2012. Not that I ever expected it to be a good read or anything. And
I was going to say, have you read, for instance, The Diary of Anne Frank, Calvin?
No, I haven't. I don't know what you're implying there, Sol. But no. The book is...
Let's have a quick list of the books you've read and books you haven't read.
Books I've read. Okay, books I've read. 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes.
God Is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens.
One or two of the James Bond books, I would imagine.
Yes, several of those.
Oh, no. you read Lemony Snicket's, didn't you?
Oh, yes, I like them very much, yes. I'm just looking over my bookshelf. I've read Jaws.
Jaws?
Yeah.
So have you read, for example, Tess of the D'Urbervilles?
No.
No? Okay.
Pass. I read a bit of the Bible. No.
We've all read a bit of the Bible. It's sat on my bedside table for the last few years, alongside a copy of the Quran and a copy of A Brief History of Time by Stephen King.
Ah.
It must be very confusing when you bring someone back to your place.
Yeah.
He's like, what is this guy
I keep
into?
getting distracted by Goosebumps books. So I don't know why I shouldn't really be making fun of you, Calvin, because
no, quite. Let's not start casting stones from glass houses, shall we?
I think I've read like 5 books ever.
I mean,
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm not a big reader either, but to be fair, I've never read 50 Shades of Grey, so I think I'm still winning.
Well, to be honest, after watching the film, you don't need to go back and read the book, because the film is actually a faithful adaptation of the book.
Well, a little bit I was reading about it was that the woman who wrote the books was heavily involved in the creative process of the film and had some pretty strong veto powers by the sound of it.
Ruined the project. It seems like the producers were, trying to... Because they produced some decent stuff.
Oh, you can't fault the screen team behind it. I mean, even Sam Taylor Johnson, she's made some great stuff.
I feel really bad for her and the credited writer of the film as well,
Kelly Marcel.
Yeah, because they all seem like competent, talented enough people.
Yeah. Kelly Marcel wrote Saving Mr. Banks. There's a really nice drama.
And, I was looking into decisions that were made and things, and I kept reading things the director wanted to do or changes they were trying to make that would 100% have, been for the better without a slightest bit of doubt in my mind. And from the sounds of it, she just kept getting shut down at everything she tried to do just kept getting vetoed by the writer, who had some sort of creative control.
Well, this is interesting because my main thing that I took from the film, my main analysis point, which we'll be getting into, is that it's not what it appears to be on the surface. These characters are flawed, and the way that they're flawed are saying more about the filmmakers than the characters.
Yeah. I don't think it's an intentional comment the film's making, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
I just want to say, before we get into the film, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of criticism of this one, I just want to say, I honestly went into this with an open mind.
I did.
Yeah.
And I knew they were assembling a talented team of, filmmakers around the project. I knew it obviously couldn't be what the book is, to the letter. So I thought, well, maybe they're going to, like Alan sort of hinted at, maybe they're going to kind of comment on the book, subvert the whole thing. Maybe it's just getting an unfair rap because it's reached a level of cultural penetration. That's not the best word to use, but because everyone knows
it's the perfect word to use.
but because of that, films will often be judged unfairly, harshly when they reach a level of notoriety that they wouldn't otherwise achieve. I wasn't expecting a good film, but I wasn't expecting the fucking abortion of cinema that
I knew it was overhyped. I wasn't sure what to expect because I haven't read the book. I knew certain things, but like you say, I went into it with an open mind and open trousers. I was hoping it was going to be worth a while. I gave it the best chance it could get. I went in horny. I gave it a real chance.
A couple of weeks ago, I went on about how much I hate Resident Evil. And if you recall, I did my top 10 worst films of all time, or bottom 10, depending on how you want to look at it. And Resident Evil was number 8 in that list. Resident Evil is now number 9 on that list.
Oh, yay!
So
maybe one day it won't be in there at all, and you'll come around to see that it's not the worst thing in the world. Where's 50 Shades on your list?
Resident Evil Afterlife and Apocalypse are still firmly number 2 and 3. But yeah, 50 Shades is number 6, the 6th worst film I've ever seen in my life.
Wow. Huh. I mean, I think, it is incredibly terrible, and I think just
to be fair, it is a case of me watching a film that I wouldn't, under ordinary circumstances, have seen.
I can't say I really love the film or anything. I didn't think it was that terrible, and I
Really?
think for the right audience that it would be possible. Yeah, I thought it was well put together. I thought those two main people were well cast. You know, they looked right. I don't know. It was kind of just passable thing on that level, and it didn't engage me particularly. And there's all sorts of issues that come up with the sexual side of it, but.
I'm firmly with Sol on this one. I mean, obviously, like I said, I'd read the book, so I knew that it's incredibly plotless.
You complained about the Unbreakable in our Unbreakable episode, part of our M. Night Shyamalan season. You complained at the idea that Unbreakable is Act 1 of a story stretched out into an entire film. Now, I would say that is exactly what 50 Shades of Grey is. It's Act
totally.
1 of a story, needlessly dragged out into a 2-hour movie, or however long it is, movie. It should have taken 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, I don't know, to get through that entire film. My understanding is that the trilogy is just finishing off that story that should have been one film. Maybe in a book it works, because maybe they stop to describe all the sex scenes every few pages, and it pads it out to the point that it couldn't possibly.
Well, this was my first concern. It was like, how are you going to make a porn film essentially for a mainstream audience, or for a mainstream certification? Are you going to go all the way and show some obviously it's for a mainstream film, it's very graphic sexually, but it's not that graphic, really.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah, I mean, the most graphic I think it gets is you see a bit of trunk at one point.
Yeah, a little bit of trunk. But your first issue with an adaptation is, how are the things that work in a book going to translate to screen? And if you're doing an erotic literature, a lot of that is down to imagination. That's kind of the whole point. Plus, you can be a lot more graphic with it. To then express it, if it's not a hardcore pornographic film, it loses a lot of its kind of kick. In which case, how do you replace that? And I don't think this replaces it with anything, does it?
Well, I thought they were at least going to make it a bit sexy,
So I don't know what you're talking about. There's nothing sexier than a contract.
Oh god, that fucking business meeting, and you could see
that was their attempt at making a contract sexy.
Oh god, and like I say, it just like with Twilight, the level of sexual repression going on in the author's head is so just profoundly just so blatant. It's wow, this is exciting for you, is it?
Are either of you sort of familiar with the S&M community particularly? I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know if we get too personal,
enough to know how hideously inaccurate this film is with regards to the whole dominant submissive relationship and all that sort of thing. That's
what I was thinking at first, right? And let's just say I've done my fair share of stuff, right? So I was coming to this from a view of a certain knowledge about these things, right? At first glance, this seems like a really unhealthy portrayal of a dominant submissive relationship that is out of whack, it's out of balance, and that is and the way it's presented.
Yeah. It's not just an unhealthy portrayal of it; it's just flat out inaccurate.
I mean, it's not realistic that you would meet someone and then just immediately go, sign this contract, you're now my slave, kind of thing. It's just, get to know me first, take me for dinner, for fuck's sake. My point is that at first glance, on a sort of superficial level, this feels like, inaccurate portrayal of that kind of relationship. But what it really shows, and I'll try and break it down a bit, is perhaps from the writer's point of view, what they think of this type of relationship, what they want from it, and what they expect to get from it, and from a position of ignorance.
The idea that spanking, for example, is dangerous, and I mean, not dangerous, but is, taking a walk on the wild side. Oh my god, he spanks her. It's the first thing you try, surely. I don't know, it's just so vanilla.
My point is that, right, when I actually looked at it, and like I say, I don't know if this is deliberate in the film, or if it's bad writing, or if it's clever directing with a script that you had to do something with, but my main point from this is that Christian Grey is not a dominant at all. He is very submissive. Yeah. And everything he does to this girl is a submissive act. Yeah. When he ties her up, all he does is pleasure her sexually. He just wants to give. He wants to make her happy. The fact that she's tied up is not relevant. Who's tied up and who's doing the tying is not what makes you dominant or submissive. It's who has the power, the psychological power. She always has the psychological power whenever they're having sex. but he has the power in normal life. And if this was written as a kind of subvertive, we make it seem like this and then it turns out to be this kind of thing, then it would be interesting. You'd have to do that in one film, though. You'd have to have that reveal and turn in one film.
He presents a contract to her, and then she says, no, change this, change that. He doesn't even negotiate with her. He just goes, yeah, right, I'll take that out, no problem. It's like, what the fuck kind of dom is that?
And that is because they're being very careful. I don't know about in the book, but in the film, they're obviously treading very carefully around ideas of consent. And they know they're having to play it safe with that. And so the way he presents it is very much like, you say whatever you want to do and then we'll do it.
Yeah. And that'd be fine if the idea was that they do all that and then they get into the bedroom and he like changes and he becomes like he's been holding in all this kind of repressed dominant energy that just comes out in the bedroom. It makes sense. But like you say, you don't see any of it, certainly in the first film. And I mean, they do have sex towards the end, don't they? Like after she's signed it. I can't even remember.
They have sex a few times, yeah.
After she signs the contract, yeah.
Yeah, only she's after taking out all of the the hardcore stuff like fisting and whatnot.
But again, like fisting isn't even. That's not really anything to do with like.
No,
dominance.
it's
just a sex
an act. Yeah,
I've had plenty of relationships, right, where I've been dominant, and I would never at any point go, so how do you feel about fisting? You just you don't sort of just say it like that. You have to develop a relationship, and you figure out what they've done before, what they like to do, what they don't like, and you just try things out, and then you do it very slowly, so that if at any point it becomes too much for either party, you stop. Or sometimes you get into the right mood and you want to be pushed, you want to have those limits pushed, and that's when you might find out something else. But my point is that you don't just sit down with someone who you've not even had a proper date with, you just met her at an office meeting, and then sit down and say, right, here's the contract, tick off what you want to do, tick off what you don't want to do. Like, even if it was normal sex, if you just sort of presented someone you were like flirted with, and you just went, oh, here's a list, we've got dinner, tick, kiss on the doorstep, tick, and then full sex on the second date, tick. You know what I mean? It's like there's nothing. And a dominant submissive relationship is not a business contract. It is an emotional relationship. Calvin, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, of the sex thing specifically.
Can I ask a very personal question, Calvin?
Oh God. Okay.
Are you a submissive or a dominant? As a general rule. I mean, I'm not saying if you're deep into that world or anything.
I'm gonna sidestep that. I'm gonna pivot. And,
I am intrigued, actually, Calvin, to know, like, when you were reading and or watching this, were you just kind of like, oh, I had no idea straight sex was so vanilla and
No, it's funny that you bring this up, because like seriously, like I actually, like, after I saw the film, I did like just talk to a couple of gay friends about it, and I was just being like, is just being gay, does that just mean that you're like outside of the sexual norm anyway? So whenever you see something that slightly, strays from the sexual norm, it just suddenly seems vanilla? Because all the stuff that they do in this film just struck me as being incredibly like, oh, you mean that's a big deal that they're doing that? It's like, and I think
I honestly don't think they did anything in this film that I didn't do. Probably on the second time I ever had sex. Like I don't think there's anything particularly. What do they do? He spanks her.
He spanks her and ties her up, and that's
he sort of ties her hands up a little, like
that's
the
blindfold.
But is she blindfolded?
On the blindfold, yeah.
Well, that's it, because she takes out all the hardcore stuff. Like, she's actually like, if what he wants is submissive, she's terrible because she didn't want to do anything. She just wants to have sex a little bit rough, and that's just sex.
At no point does she express any submissive behaviours at all. Yeah. I mean, she constantly fights. She's also very inexperienced, so she's unsure of herself, and he's kind of taking advantage of that. She very clearly shows that she's not into that at every level. And then when she acquiesces, it's kind of in deference to him as this kind of domineering personality, but not in a submissive, dominant, trusting relationship, more in a just kind of, all right, I don't really know what else to do kind of way. I mean, at best, she's a brat, so she kind of likes to fight. She likes to fight back and then be dominated or be punished on that. But even that doesn't really sell her full personality. So it's clear this relationship doesn't work in that balance.
Well, I think it's interesting that at the end of the film, the thing that, makes her leave is that he hits her a little bit too hard.
I think the biggest bit of proof that the director is actually a talented, director who knows what they're doing, and that E.L. James ruined everything. I mean, I doubt this would have ever been a good film, but I think that E.L. James ensured that it was one of the all-time worst films that I've ever seen, like I say. That scene with them going into the lift, he was going to follow her to the lift and she was going to say her safe words, red, in order to prevent him from following her. And I think that would have been the best scene in the film, but E.L. James vetoed it. Didn't like it.
But you know why that wouldn't have worked and why it's better that she says stop? It's because if she says red, then that means she's still playing within the rules. She's still using the safe word. She's playing in his game. By just saying stop, it's just saying, like, this is not a game anymore. I'm saying stop. Leave me alone. And she is removing herself from the thing. No, that is a defiant act of...
I don't know. Because if you say stop, then, I mean, the whole point of the safe word is so that you know that that's not just part of the game.
The safe words are bullshit anyway, because you only need a safe word if you're playing the game where saying no or saying stop or whatever is part of it. Like, you want maybe rape fantasy or whatever, but they're not doing any of that. If you're whipping someone or whatever, and then you go, stop, you stop. You don't kind of like, unless you know.
I don't know how the sequels play out, but I'm sure Christian Grey doesn't, give up on her. I'm sure he follows her, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is some weird sexual element of, I love being, stalked by this creepy guy. There certainly wasn't the first film, and if you break out the safe word, you are categorically saying this is not part of the game anymore. This is not part of that. I get where you're coming from, but I think that, I don't know, I think it would have been a nice moment at the end of the film.
This is an interesting thing, which this film, as I could say, I think it accidentally starts touching into in terms of ideas of consent or ideas of where you push your limits and where you don't and how you feel safe. Because this type of sex, and indeed any type of sex, is all about that cat and mouse of, like, if you're just flirting with someone, you're constantly thinking, did she respond the way I thought she was going to? I didn't get a response there. Maybe I should back off a little bit. All that kind of thing you're doing. And like I say, if you then present right at the beginning, here's what I'm interested in, give me a list of what you're interested in, let's see what works, contract. It's not sexy, it's not romantic, it's not interesting or entertaining. The whole point of romance and will they, won't they, is that whole dynamic of, I'm feeling you out, you're feeling me out, we're figuring each other out.
The whole submissive dominant thing as well is so, like, unless you're going to do it, like, really properly, it's such a basic thing. Like, I've had...
That's it, like...
I've had sessions where I've gone from being one to the other, like, back and forth about, like, we swapped round about, like, 5 times in one go. Like, that's how vanilla a concept it is.
Yeah, exactly. I suspect I've gone a lot further down this road than you have, but at the same time, some people really do want to kind of live it as a lifestyle. I mean, that doesn't appeal to me particularly. I think it's a kind of sexual thing. You do it in the
level
moment,
of
then...
when it becomes, like you say, part of the sort of communal. There's a community for it. I think that is when it crosses over into being a kind of lifestyle choice. Yeah.
The guy in this, the Christian Grey, he, like, right off the bat, he's not being dominant, he's being controlling. He's like, where are you? Why are you doing that? You're drinking too much, do this. And it's not done as part of a game. It's purely him trying to control her. And that's why it doesn't work. That's why it feels really horrible and kind of manipulative. When they're actually having sex and they're doing stuff, she seems really into it. Because it's not dominant submissive, they're just having sex. and she just doesn't know enough to know that that's just normal sex. Like, if you have sex with someone, you're going to pull their hair a bit, or you're going to, like, throttle them a little bit, see if they go with that. Little punch to the ribs. Normal stuff, right, guys?
I made viewing notes. Did either of you?
Well, before we go into that, I feel like we may have let Calvin get away with this too much. He's been too quiet, and I want to know his opinion on these things.
And what?
Well, you have a different perspective to us.
Yeah, no, I do, which is why this all just seemed very vanilla. Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's like what you say, Alan. Like, and a part of it is because I don't know whether, because we're obviously quite liberal people who, and we're not the target audience for this film, which is
we're not 45-year-old women from Iowa, are we?
Yeah.
women. Well, yeah, exactly, who haven't really ever experienced anything like that before in their lives.
Number one, we are, like you say, quite liberal. Number two, we are of the well, maybe not Alan, but certainly you and I, Calvin, are of the internet porn generation. So maybe we're going to grow up to be
I'm familiar with that.
but maybe we're going to grow up to be a generation of sexual deviants, whereas the generations above us perhaps are a lot less exposed to this sort of thing. In fact, I mean, going off on a bit of a tangent here, you really can see how attitudes to sex have like massively changed in the last, like with the advent of internet porn. It does have to be said that perhaps one of the positives of this book is that it did open the eyes of anyone 40 and above who perhaps had never even considered the possibility of being spanked or you know, a light bit of asphyxiation or something. I don't know. But
you got to say, right, we're saying how tame the sex is in the film, but that's only because we're talking about it and it's a film about sex, basically. But in terms of mainstream films go, that's quite revealing. There's a lot of nudity, a lot of sex stuff in it. So I was kind of surprised that sort of thing is being presented in a film that is for, 45-year-old women. And so it is a bit like, that's quite forward thinking, I suppose, in some ways. And it's like you say, the internet has changed the way we use pornography, the way we view pornography socially.
We've talked a lot about the sexual side of it, I suppose. Is it even worth talking about the non-sexual side of the film?
Like, what other side is there?
Well, just like the plot in general. Like, if you take away all the steamy sex scenes, what do we have at the end of it?
Well, it's pretty much the same. There's not that much, like... More of the film isn't sex than is, but it's this constant build-up to sex. But not, and like in theory, that should be sexy. It should be that sort of...
I'll tell you why none of that worked for me and why the relationship in general didn't work for me. Because Christian Grey doesn't appear to have a personality. He's got no sense of humour whatsoever. He's not charming. The only thing he has going for him is that he's kind of rich.
Yeah. I'm quite interested to know, Calvin, physically speaking, is he an attractive man?
Oh, good Lord in heaven, yes. My God. Yes. Good Jesus Christ. How do you have to
We found his type.
Well, he doesn't
He's
look...
beautiful.
I wouldn't have thought to look at him.
What are you talking about?
He looks a bit gangly and like...
No, he's kind of... The thing is, he's
frail.
like nice... He's nicely toned without being like a muscle guy. He's not
But you
beefed
don't
up.
buy him as a dom.
He looks like
he
takes care of himself. You don't have to be like physically imposing to be a dom, though. That's the whole point.
I've just found my note about Christian Grey from when he first appears in the film.
Right.
I imagine... Well, basically I've said I imagine him being very masculine and domineering, but he seems very childlike and baby-faced, and like I could probably take him in a fight. Like...
I wouldn't go that far, Sol.
And then
he'd get you on your back and you wouldn't be able to get back up.
How did you guys feel about, like, the film tries to make some kind of connection between, like, childhood trauma and Christian's love of BDSM, which, to my mind, felt quite, offensive, I guess, to people from the BDSM community, to imply that, if you're into this kind of stuff, you must have had some fucked up stuff happen to you as a kid.
I mean... I thought it was offensively simplistic. I thought like
I didn't
it was
particularly read it as like the actual sort of child abuse that he had from his original mother or whatever it was. I didn't particularly read that as a direct connection to him being into S&M. It was more about giving him weakness or sort of showing this frailty to him so that we could sort of care about him more. I don't know if there was a direct connection there, but the fact that someone got him at a young, impressionable age and made him a submissive, and perhaps that leads into something from his childhood where, he was very put upon, and so he kind of wants someone to look after him in that sense. I
really liked the idea that everyone enters into the community and begins as a submissive, and then they have to kind of work their way up and graduate and become a dominant. Because that's the impression that gives.
But that all made sense to me because he's obviously not a dominant, and he's trying to do that because he now feels like he's having to push against it, and that this life of power that he has, this life of wealth and power, should translate into that as well. Whereas actually, he should be looking for the opposite of that. That his private life should be the release of this professional and responsibility and stress that's on him. That's what most people want, something different in their lives. Most people want variety. But then at the same time, he's obviously got some sort of anger and frustration issues that he needs to deal out, and which is why he wants to express this physically. He wants to beat her. And he's just getting it wrong. He's managing to conflate these two things, which he shouldn't be doing. But like I say, I think this is an interesting look at this sort of thing, because I think there are a lot of people out there who will have very different sexual sides of themselves, and they're trying to match them together in some sort of something that works together, and it doesn't necessarily work. You could have one particular side of yourself that you can do with this person, and another side of you can do with this person, and never the twain need to meet.
We're learning so much about each other, aren't we? I couldn't stop thinking, of Kelsey Grammer through the whole thing. For some reason, I just kept because obviously Christian Grey does a lot of very creepy things, and
I bet you've said that during sex.
I just couldn't stop thinking about, if Kelsey Grammer was playing this character, the movie was exactly the same, everyone else was exactly the same, but Kelsey Grammer was Christian Grey, how different a film it would be. But because he's young and handsome, we just accept his, stalking.
Why did you go to Kelsey Grammer, though?
I don't know. I think it's because I was thinking, if you cast, an older man in this, would it just be, leery and... I don't know, maybe it's because he's kind of rich and posh, and it made me think of Frasier. I don't know, but...
It's like you said earlier, there aren't many 27-year-old millionaire CEO kind of people. He should be 54. And that would make it a very different story.
But that's it.
But it would be more realistic.
He's inherited his wealth, though, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But then I do think that kind of... I don't know. I don't know. So I checked the time, and it's 42 minutes into the film when the first sex scene actually begins.
Wow.
Which is... There's a lot of build-up to it. I did think it'd be a lot sexier, a lot quicker.
Oh, he uses a condom. Did that, because you just never sort of see that in films, and I just thought it was quite okay then.
I know, that's when I really knew that he wasn't taking it seriously. If you're going to use condom, that's the point.
It's something that you never see in films, and then here it was. It was all right then.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I did notice it because, like you say, films generally don't bother to, the same way they don't bother to show people sneezing or nipping to the toilet.
This guy won't even go on a date without a contract. I mean, talk about safe sex. Fucking hell.
Yeah, true.
But what really annoys me, though, he makes a massive song and dance about his, quotes, desires being singular. Yet he shags her totally normally, just to kind of get it out of the way. And then he shags her again on the piano again, afterwards. So his desires aren't singular. He's fine with
just shagging.
A bit of normal sex. But, the way he makes that out is he can only get it up if he's breaking a skin with a whip. He doesn't...
Well, he got introduced to this world of S&M, and so that's all he has now to make himself appear interesting. And so he hangs on it like a crutch, because he has no personality. He has money, so he can make flashy shows of things, and he has this kind of knowledge of a certain world of sexuality that to someone who's completely inexperienced seems very exotic and kind of fascinating. And that makes him feel like, for this moment in his life, he feels like he's actually worth something. Really, he knows he's not.
Wow.
Because his mother taught him that he wasn't.
I bet you really like the scene, Calvin, when they're gonna do it, and then a woman walks in and he goes, "It's my mother," and then she goes, "I'm naked." I
do love the scenes with his mother, because Marcia Gay Harden plays his mother, and she's a very stereotypical posh lady, isn't she? Very upper crust and all that sort of thing. So I like her when she just flounces in occasionally, and yeah.
It really annoyed me, though, because as if you'd walk out to meet your, this guy you're sleeping with's mother for the first time, as if you'd, be putting your clothes on when you come out. You'd take the extra 10 seconds to get dressed.
You wouldn't even come out. I'd just hide in the fucking bedroom. This is like that time when I was at my girlfriend's house and her ex-boyfriend came round, and I had to hide in the bedroom because in case he saw me, and I was naked.
Oh, God.
He was coming to pick up his stuff, and she'd chucked him out.
Did you carry on massaging your? I don't know how to word this. Did you carry on wanking off whilst you were in the cupboard?
There you go. Just say it. Well, you know, what else was I going to do?
Because, well, it's one thing if he had gone like, oh, you know what? There's that thing in the cupboard I forgot to pick up as well. It's one thing if he opens the cupboard door and there's a naked man. It's another thing if he opens the door and there's a naked man with a fucking erection, like, pointed at him.
Well, I figured it would make me seem like more of a threat, if anything.
More of a threat.
I mean, nobody wants to fight a naked man, but much less one with an erection.
I'd feel more vulnerable if I was, like, aroused. 'Cause, are you not familiar with the cautionary tale of Uncle Billy?
Well, are you not familiar with the scary nature of my erect penis, apparently? Strikes fear into the heart, so I'm told.
I'm more familiar with it than I'd like to be, I'll say that.
Straight, I don't remember that.
So, after the mum comes in,
Yes.
he says she was excited. She's never seen me with a woman before. Did no one proofread this script? Just like checking for, because that sounds really weird.
Wouldn't it have been better, that scene, if she was like tied up in some kind of harness with
Yeah.
like covered in
Ball
like,
gag
I
in
don't
her
know,
mouth and,
candle
like, a
wax
butt
or
plug
something.
with a tail on it.
and then they have to quickly like try and hide her or clean her up, and like, it would be a classic comedy scenario.
Yeah, and she forgets to take the butt plug out, but she's like put her clothes on around it. So then she has to like sit down for brunch.
Yeah, and then she go, and then the mother
that-
goes, "Let's all go to dinner," and they haven't got time to change and have to go out. He's still wearing suspenders. He's like,
You know that
you're
you
wearing
can
lipstick,
get
Christian.
those.
What's going on?
You can get those like remote controlled like love egg things where you know you put them up and then you can like press a button and then they vibrate. And
The remote gets left on the settee, and she keeps like her mum accidentally sits on it, and then she's like she keeps moving.
Or they go out to like the cafe and like the cat keeps like batting it or something. So, so she's looking at these photos on of people in like really basic bondage gear, and she's like shocked by it. It's like really full. She's sort of like, oh my god.
But like you say, I think we're jaded. I think we've kind of. I know I am.
But I mean, if you look at that and you think, oh my god, like. It's probably not for you, to be honest. It's probably not the right subculture.
Well, that's what
to
I
be.
mean. She never at any point has any interest in this world whatsoever.
Red's a really stupid safe word as well, by the way.
Red.
That's a really bad... You want something like
Avocado.
pineapple or...
Palestine.
Well, let's not get into politics. But yeah, something completely.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a really
never
good
said.
safe word, something like Donald Trump would do it. Just immediately
I
kill
mean,
the vibe.
Yeah, my erection is gone.
Anything like that.
I'm talking about being jaded and all that. You know when you know at the end when he like properly gives her a good old whipping. She's genuinely hurt. She's upset. She's sort of the trust is completely broken.
Yeah.
That was the one time I got really hard. Does that make me a bad person?
I'm surprised that you got into it at all, to be honest. Like I said, I thought it was the most unsexy film.
Yeah,
I made a note of the most unsexy thing in the world here.
All right.
Because there's that bit where she kind of like dribbles during sex. Did you notice that?
No, I don't remember that. What is it
I
like
like
a bit
that,
of spit between them or something?
It's really weird because the thing is, I had to rewind because we were watching it and I thought she'd started crying, and I mentioned it to my partner and she didn't hadn't noticed it, so I rewound it, and it's like a big globule of saliva like falls from her mouth down her cheek during the first bit of like BDSM sex with the cable ties.
She's not like choked on anything, which has made her sort of spit up a bit.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, yeah, if he'd been ramming like a 10-inch dildo down her throat, that would have been great. But...
That's what I mean. If there's justification for it, then fair enough. But it's honestly, I found it so weird because there isn't. He's not like choking her at that point. I don't think, and they're just having sex. And then he asks if it's nice, which isn't a dom sub thing. You don't go, oh, is that nice? Are you enjoying that?
Yeah, we all just want to have fun.
Oh, we do, yeah.
And if it's at the expense of someone else's mental well-being, then so be it.
Were you surprised when fisting was dropped into the conversation in the meeting? Because I was. Because the film had been...
It was anal fisting, is what it was.
Yeah. The film was so tame up until that point that I just wasn't expecting them to, like, even go there. And then she's just like...
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, yeah, fisting, blah, blah, blah. And it's the way it's just dropped in casually.
I like that it's just casual, but I was
but the film hasn't been that casual about anything up until that point.
Well,
so I just found it really jarring. It caught me
right.
off guard because I wasn't expecting it. It's because, like you say, that's kind of the level the film should have pitched everything at. Because I mean, you know, fisting's not that big a deal, but it goes back to what we were saying, what Alan was saying about this being a mainstream film that's just kind of.
I agree. I thought that as well. They just sort of dropped that in very suddenly, like build up to it. Especially if you're going through a contract, you could build up like saying, "Oh, you'll tie you up, shove this up you, or whatever." Anal. You at least start with anal before going to anal fisting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Come on, give me a chance.
What else does she say no to? There are a couple of other things, aren't they? That no to dildos,
genital clamps, I think it was, something like that. Yeah. But because she actually says genital clamps. What are those? Like, what the fuck do you think they are? You stupid cow. But that's why you don't sit down and have a conversation about we do this, because as soon as they say no to something, you just think, well, I'm wasting my time here. Like, give me something to aspire to, and you know, the idea you build up in increments, and then you go. But you don't go straight to anal fisting. For God's sake, what are you doing? She's a virgin, for Christ's sake.
Well, again, going back to the age thing, my theory is they purposely cast someone who looks a lot older than... Because how old's the actor? She about 25 or something?
The actress, Dakota Johnson.
Yeah.
She's 27.
But I mean, she looks older than that. I think. Oh my god,
she's my age.
I think she looks about 35. And I think that's a very conscious...
Oh no, come on.
She looks so much older than.
I don't know.
What
he's like 35 or something. In this film, she must have been like 25 when she filmed it.
But I genuinely think they cast someone who they were consciously aware looked older. Yeah, I think they were desperate to avoid anything feeling a bit icky about the whole affair. About it being she's a bit young, and I think they wanted to she looks really old, so
well, yeah, can you blame her?
That's my theory anyway.
Really old? She does not look really old at all.
No, but she does look older than the character.
She's 10 days older than me.
21.
She's 10 days older than me, which means she's not that much older than you.
Well, I probably wouldn't cast you as a 21-year-old Calvin, if I'm completely honest.
Oh God!
I don't know. You've still got that. You've still got that twink charm, Calvin. Don't worry.
Twink on the turn, I think, is what the phrase is.
What does a twink become?
Come on, Calvin. You can pull off being a grey fox with a bit of grey in your hair and a little bit of stubble, and you can age gracefully.
You need to bulk up a bit,
right?
mate. You need to fill out.
Yeah, I know.
You're too gangly.
I know. Yes.
Calvin. What does
Are you negging him, Alan?
What does a twink become in the gay world when they're too old to be a twink anymore?
They can either try and hold on to their twinkiness and then become just twinks on the turn, is what the phrase is. And or they mature and they become otters or bears or...
You got to get fat to be a bear, though.
After they've turned, what do you call a twink on the turn?
Daddy? I mean, I wouldn't personally, but I that is a phrase that people use.
Oh, God.
You know?
Right. I made another note here. So during that sex scene when he gives her a reach around, like, it really struck me at that moment that Danny Elfman had to sit down and write score for that. You had to watch that like hundreds of times and like write music to go along it.
I bet he was totally up for it. This seems like the kind of thing that he'd have a blast writing music for.
Yeah, like, they're really dull characters, the two leads, and it really struck me that like they should have, like, I think he's meant to be like this kind of fun billionaire character. They should have written him like he was Tony Stark or something, and he you know,
that's
the
what I
kind of
mean. He's got no
billionaire who will
personality.
go to Monaco and jump in one of the cars because he can, and race around the track because he can. But he
I wanted to be able to
anything.
believe that she was bowled over by this kind of charismatic man, and obviously he has the money to be able to sort of flash things around. But do we at any point see them having a conversation that isn't about sex?
Well, there's one about a contract.
That's yeah, but there's not, like, we don't see any interaction with them that we see a personal connection that they might be interested in each other in any way.
You know, when Christian says I'm 50 Shades of fucked up, by the way,
Yeah.
did that, like, it's like he breaks the fourth wall. It's like he knows the name of the film that he's in order to reference it, because that isn't a commonly used phrase.
No way! Yeah, exactly.
That's where the name of the book comes from, because it's a phrase.
Is it, though?
It's not a phrase.
Yeah, I mean, it's not.
I've never heard anyone say 50 Shades of Grey as like a reference to... Or 50 Shades of anything.
Like, obviously, it just, like, it makes sense without knowing the title of the film, but it would be like if in Star Trek, Spock just turned around and went, "Hey, Kirk, do you want to go for a little Star Trek later on?" And just winked at the camera. It's like...
Yeah. It's a horrible line. It's in the book.
Oh, God. So, yeah, the book itself... I just want to mention, like, how it's written. So it's written in the present tense, in the first person.
Yes,
which is really, like, difficult to read. So it's constantly like, I move my hands up his back, and he caresses my face. Yeah.
Well, you know all about the inner goddess stuff.
I was just about to say,
you?
I've just... Yes. Yeah, it says here, it uses the phrase... In the trilogy, this is. It uses the phrase, my inner goddess... 115 times in her inner monologue.
Yeah, it's like her monologue and what her inner goddess are feeling are two different things. So she might not be liking it. She might not be like, you know, like being tied down, but her inner goddess is feeling liberated by...
Wow.
Okay.
That sounds like really weird psychological thing going on there. That's interesting.
It's dreadful.
Compartmentalizing, like, oh God, that's really weird.
Yeah.
Are the books set in America?
Yeah. It's set in Seattle, where the film's set.
Yeah. Oh, that's why Kelsey Grammer was doing it.
Oh, you're right.
God.
Oh my
Tossed
God.
salad and scrambled eggs. Oh no, I was thinking there's something else you can toss, and something to do with eggs. There's a sex joke in there. Tossed penis and fertilized eggs.
Oh, he used a condom.
I doubt Kelsey Grammer's ever seen a condom in his life.
Because he's a real man.
Doesn't seem like the type. It just doesn't seem like the type.
I mean, you're lucky if he spits on it first.
I doubt Kelsey Grammer's ever climaxed inside a woman either. I reckon he pulls out and just does it all over them every time. He's quite conservative, isn't he? I think he's got a lot.
He's a Republican. Yeah.
I bet his wife's 20 years younger than him. All right.
Probably even more than 20 years. I think she herself might be 20.
Nice.
We're getting into slanderous territory again, but it's fine. I was gonna get much worse then, but I won't.
I don't think that Kelsey Grammer or his representatives are going to be listening and take.
Well, if they are, Kelsey Grammer, come on the show and refute these claims. And if not, we'll take your silence as as proof. Kelsey Grammer. I really wasn't expecting us to get this deep into the Kelsey Grammer discussion on the 50 Shades of Grey episode.
Does this mean that whenever we do our Frasier episode, we'll end up talking about, I don't know...
50 Shades of...
Yes. We'll end up talking about BDSM.
Oh, that would be a wonderful... Okay, so they are making sequels to this.
Yes, which is why we're reviewing this podcast. I think they filmed them pretty much back to back. One is out this coming week. The next one is out near Valentine's Day next week. Next year.
Do you think they'll be that big? I kind of feel like the world's had its 50 Shades moment and it's kind of moved on now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was phenomenally successful financially.
I'm sure this will make money, but I can't see it being
well, they're very cheap films to make, really.
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the first one was like $40 million to make, and it made, like, you know...
that's a bit much, to
600.
Where have they spent $40 million on it?
There's a helicopter and a glider, and... Danny Elfman's probably not cheap.
When I was watching the behind-the-scenes stuff, Sam Taylor-Johnson insisted that all these sex toys be bespoke. She wanted them to be particular colours that didn't actually exist. Now some like BDSM expert on saying, she wanted all these like leather, like these brown leather things that don't really exist, so we had to like make them.
That can't have cost much though. Like,
it's got a lot of sex toys.
It's not like they actually needed to be things you could use.
Yeah, he never uses anything, so
they're just props. They can't have cost that much. Like, I mean, it is shot quite nicely, so.
Oh, it's very attractive, cinematography-wise.
Yeah, so I guess, they did hire top-end writers and directors and stuff, so... But anyway, so they're making sequels. They'll no doubt be every bit as bad as the first one.
I hear that I haven't read the sequel books, but apparently they do actually have more plot. There's some, like, stalker woman in one of them who's, like, after Christian Grey, and she gets
Is it Mrs. Robinson?
I don't know. But I hear there's a car chase.
Ooh.
Yes.
Well.
So there we go. It's already more exciting than the film we saw.
Okay, so my idea for a sequel is sort of what you mentioned before, Calvin, about how if Kelsey Grammer was the guy, Christian Grey, it'd be like really just a very, very different film. And I'm not saying we get Kelsey Grammer.
Oh, damn it.
I'm not saying we recast. I'm just saying... One of the things that seems to be weirdly popular with these sorts of fan-fiction-y books is the idea of the sidequel, I guess. The sequel that's like the same thing from someone else's perspective.
Okay, sorry. Do you know that this is an actual thing?
Have they actually published it?
E.L. James, she published 50 Shades of Grey from Christian Grey's perspective. So it's the exact same story, but his monologue.
Well, we buy the rights to that, and we make that into the next film. Because I was just thinking that through the very nature of it, though, by doing that, you're gonna basically make like not a slasher, but like a serial killer thriller. And it's going to recontextualize the entire film into part one of a horror movie, and because quite frankly, if this was a normal film, it would play almost identically with everything being really sexy and alluring, supposedly, for the first two acts. And the third act would be when all this weird stalker bullshit, the likes of presumably tracing her phone to find her in that club. That is like implicitly what he did, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so, because it's not possible to do that with that kind of speed. He must have had someone watching her and already there. So,
ooh, okay.
God.
But you see all that creepy shit he's doing, and it'd be really scary because we've never seen that from a kind of billionaire rich person perspective. It's usually Robin Williams is an old man who works in a photo developing lab, so you see someone with resources doing that sort of thing, and in the third act it all boils up, comes to a head, and he ends up like chasing her. It becomes your standard serial killer thing, and because he steals her car in the film. That's just brushed off like a normal thing to do. But, you know, all you have to do, you see a lot of the same footage even from the first film, but you just recontextualize it. You add in a few scenes where he, you know, like after he has sex with her, he kind of like walks out into the corridor and kind of, you know, falls back against the wall naked and puts his head in his hands and just kind of goes and, like crying and like because he's clearly working through some issues.
Is that what you do after sex, Saul?
I'm not a crazed stalker, man.
You say, but really, you know,
I'm not working through issues in quite the same way.
We've both lived with you.
We've all got it. What sexual issues do you think I've worked through sexually?
You've got that thing about. I remember that always haunted me for many years.
That's just laziness. That's not like
that's not how you pitched it to me at the time.
I don't remember.
I do.
To be honest.
So I do imagine you as.
It's certainly just laziness. Now.
I do imagine you as very much a kind of you get on top kind of guy. You just lay there and let them do the work.
I do like that, but that's, you know, that's when it's a treat for me.
Do you stipulate it in your contract that like 1/3 of the time
that I do? I stipulate that both parties must reach at least one orgasm, and then I bite into a Scotch egg. But my theory about Christian Grey is that because we never see anything to do with his business, we never see him doing any business other than the contract, and that doesn't count. We never see anything really about him. So my theory is that he's inherited his wealth and that he is kind of a failure in his own eyes because he doesn't feel like he's living up to the family lineage. And I think that his sexual antics are a way of working through an inadequacy complex that he has built around this. I suppose logically I should really pitch yet another idea where he runs for president, becomes president of the United States of America, but we've already done
I mean, yeah,
a few of those
that occurred
episodes.
to me as well. I just thought we've done it enough times now.
But genuinely, sort of reading more into the film than is there, if we were to make sense of it, I think that is it. He's got massive feelings of inadequacy, and that's what he's working through sexually. So I think you play on that and just make a box standard slasher movie at the end.
That'd be quite nice, actually. A slasher film with like a S&M sort of twist.
When you say you see it from the man's point of view, do you mean literally like you see it like a slasher
Not
film
like
where you
Picture.
see him looking through the windows and then
Well, like Black
and
Christmas.
plus that's like there's a classic porn scenario as well, the POV porn. So you can add that element into it as well.
True.
You go up to the point where she goes into the lift and walks away, and then you just add 20 minutes at the end of him, you know, pressing the lockdown button on his building and cutting the power to the lift and chasing her through the air vent and screaming after her. So what's your idea then, Calvin?
Yeah.
Right.
If yours is so good.
Go ahead, Calvin. I'm listening.
Unfortunately, there's no Kelsey Grammer in it. Maybe we could find a role for him somewhere. Recast Christian with Kelsey Grammer. And
Have we seen Christian's father yet?
Oh, there was that. Yeah. He was that man at dinner, wasn't he? Oh, you mean biological father?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, you're right.
I got a bit confused with all the adoption stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
Oh, you're right. He is adopted, isn't he?
Yeah. So my first instinct was to pitch some kind of like, I mean, there is already a spoof movie that exists of 50 Shades of Grey. It's called 50 Shades of
Gay?
Black.
Oh, right. Let me guess, 50 Shades of Black is anything to do with the Wayans brothers?
Yes, it's those Marlon Wayans.
What a surprise.
And that's just as you can expect. But my instinct was to go more Carry On with it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like, if Carry On was still a thing, I think they'd do a really good 50 Shades of Grey spoof. But I'm not pitching that.
Would it be? Hang on. What would it be called? Carry On Caning.
Carry On Caning.
Carry On Negotiating.
Contracts. Carry On Contracting. Diseases.
Carry On Contracting. I just think it'd be really good if you had like all the old ones, like they're all dead now, but like Sid James and Hattie Jakes and Kenneth Williams and Barbara Windsor. You could just got all
Barbara
them.
could play his mother, who comes in.
Who would wait?
Right,
who
would
be
his parents?
Who would be Christian Grey though? Would it be Sid James or Kenneth Williams? Because you got two very different styles of film there.
Oh, you mean actually just use that? Okay.
I mean, we're talking classic.
I think
era, obviously.
it'd be Kenneth Williams, surely.
As Christian Grey.
Which one's he?
The really camp one. Like, oh, matron.
Yeah.
That one.
I'm afraid I've never actually seen a Carry On movie.
You must have seen.
But I'm aware of the. I'm aware of the camp one. Is he Matron? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
And I'm aware of Barbara Windsor's like bra falling off.
See that would definitely be Barbara Windsor like coming onto him and him like going, "Oh no, I just want to spank you. Oh my gosh!" And then
that's a good impression, Alan.
And then like Sid James would have to be. Maybe his brother, I guess. It's like,
yeah.
No, I'll take it for you. Like that's Sid James. And then, so he'd take care of the sister.
Yeah. Calvin, say matron.
Matron. Was that as good as you were expecting?
It's Alan Rick.
Matron.
So
sorry,
anyway, my pitch. That isn't my pitch. My pitch is a story where something actually happens, or something it has something of a structure. So basically, I think it's a missed opportunity, like not to do something thrillery with this. Like it could be sort of like a Basic Instinct, like Fatal Attraction style, like erotic thriller. And I think it's a real shame that it has no thriller elements in it at all.
It has all of the setups for one.
It does, doesn't it?
It just doesn't have any of the payoffs.
It's like when you were talking about, because like, I guess like it's categorized on the internet as an erotic romantic drama, but it like you say, it's filmed almost like a thriller. It has all the, at some point you would think probably like after she's introduced to his mother or something that something would happen and that he'd snap and kill someone, or he kills all the women he spanks or something like that. I don't know. So, my sequel picks up immediately after the end of the film. So, a few months have passed since she walked out on Christian, and she's relaxing at home with her flatmate, Anastasia, and she gets a call, and it's from Mrs. Grey, Christian's mother, who's now going to be played by Barbara Windsor, because we're recasting. And Mrs. Grey is Barbara Windsor, and Mr. Grey is Kelsey Grammer. And she insists...
I bet they'd get on.
Christian's mother insists that Anastasia comes to the family mansion to talk things through with her. Christian hasn't been the same, and he's practically suicidal at the moment. He's gone off the deep end. Anastasia doesn't go at first, but she, harks back to her time with Christian and weeps over the moderate bruising she received as a result of their not all that kinky sex. Her flatmate tells her to get over herself and that she majorly overreacted by walking out of him in the first place, reminding her that she knew what she was getting into. She signed the contract, and if all she really wants is a vanilla sexual relationship, then she shouldn't string a guy along like she did with Christian. Anyway.
She was asking for it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it's all her own fault.
Okay.
And she uses being a virgin as an excuse. Anyway. Eventually, Anastasia decides to go up to the mansion, and the entire family are there, so we can bring back Rita Ora and Christian's brother, and both his parents are there. Mrs. Grey takes Anastasia into a room, and we see Christian far from being his perfectly presented self. He has a scraggy beard, long hair, he looks like he's been living on the streets, and he's jabbering away like a madman. Turns out that he's actually been living rough since Anastasia left him. She was the only girl he ever truly loved, etc., and Mrs. Grey says that they've been trying various solutions to snap him out of it, but nothing has worked. So, as a last resort, she called Anastasia, who feels duped, but nonetheless starts talking to Christian and tries to cure him with pop psychology. Now, we haven't had a sex scene yet, so Anna decides to try and soothe Christian's mood by wanking him off, which works a bit, because what I want to do is start small and build up over the course of the film. So we start out with a bit of a reach around, and then, we'll eventually build up to the climactic sex scene. But, oh, by the way, there's a storm, and everyone is trapped in the mansion. So Anna has to stay the night.
When this turned into a Miss Marple episode, what happened there?
Oh, okay, then you've preempted me by one line, because my next sentence is...
Go on.
Anna stays the night, and during which there's a blood-curdling scream, and we follow Anna out of her room, see that Mrs. Grey has been murdered. And all the other inhabitants and family members appear, all claiming to know nothing of the murder until that very moment, but Anna is suspicious. She goes and finds Christian, who's locked away in a room, and as such, he's the only other person who couldn't possibly have murdered Mrs. Grey. So, she releases him, and the pair investigate the murder over the course of the night. Now, this middle section isn't especially thought through, but it's basically the pair questioning the rest of the family one by one. We get into some suspenseful situations, and they have lots of sex while doing it. But like I say, the sex starts small and works up to be bigger, and after each sex scene, Christian sort of retains back some of his personality that we saw in the film. So he's being healed over the course of the investigation. During this, we have an emotional scene, and this is to relate back to the pop psychology of the first film, Christian's psychological issues. We have an emotional scene in which Anna unlocks the cause of Christian's trauma. And a group of migrating geese crash into the house. Sorry, I'm laughing at my own pitch. So, when you write something and then you eventually read it back and you think, God, this is really stupid. Anyway.
Hey, it's not nearly as stupid as 50 Shades of Grey, so I wouldn't worry about it.
So... a group of migrating geese are disturbed by the storm and crash into the house, and Christian freaks out.
It's like the moment in Magnolia when it starts raining frogs.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
something like that.
This is when it all comes flooding back to Christian. Christian confesses that previous childhood trauma has returned to him, and this was the result of his descent into near madness, which Anastasia caused, because Anastasia would always bite her lip, which Christian was intrigued by, but subconsciously he'd repressed a horrific incident of when he was a child, when a horde of Russian swans... Sorry, I can't make it through this without laughing. Okay. So, a horde of... it reminds him of an horrific incident when he was a child, when a horde of Russian swans overwhelmed him and started biting at his face, including one with bright blue eyes that bit his lip clean off. So, Christian is actually only attractive because of millions of dollars worth of reconstructive surgery.
What's a Russian swan?
Well, no, because her name is Anastasia, which is Russian. So that's I'm tying this in.
The swan was called Anastasia.
No, Anastasia's Anastasia, and it's a Russian name.
But she's not Russian.
No, but the swan is. So now that this is all come flooding back, Christian is back to his normal self, and Randy has a stoat. Anna accepts that she was.
Is that a phrase?
Yeah, they use it in an episode of Frasier, actually. Niles says it. So, I'm taking it as, a phrase. Anna accepts that she was silly to embark on an S&M relationship with him when she can barely take any pain at all, and once again submits to Christian fully, now that she's decided that, she's just going to take whatever he's going to give her, and he fists her up the arse and the vag at the same time. And that's our big sex scene at the end. After the pair leave the room that they were in with the geese, they through some amazing deduction, they pin the murder on Rita Ora, who murdered her adoptive mother because of reasons, and but that's not important because here's the twist: Mrs. Grey isn't really dead. She planned the whole thing, and it was actually an elaborate ruse to force Anna and Christian together. Even the storm was manufactured by machines and things outside because they're rich and they can afford it. So Anna and Christian go to bed, where we see that she's oddly disappointed, and Christian agrees that the murder brought a certain spice to the sex and the whole situation, that really got off on it. We then cut to Rita Ora, who is preparing to go back to bed, when Anna and Christian break in and murder her, slashing her throat and wrists, and Rita Ora bleeds out on the bed as Christian and Anna start rolling around and having sex in her blood as credits roll. And that's my pitch. Yeah.
I gotta just say, well, how many episodes have we done now? About 36. That's the weirdest thing you've ever come up with, Calvin. That was a long way out of your normal purview.
It was a bit, wasn't it?
Have you been losing some sleep this week?
Oh my god, I have. I'm really tired. Alan, do you have a more sensible pitch?
A strange insight into Calvin's sexuality there. Okay, all right. Well, my pitch. Now, bear in mind that what I said about Christian not really being a dominant, he's being the submissive, and so I want to develop that for the sake of a title pun. Let's call it stainless steel.
Oh,
I mean,
that's good.
Doesn't really have any meaning, but it's better than 50 Shades of Grey. So,
did she get a bit of blood on the bed sheets?
Why is it about blood with you? What's wrong with you? What's the blood?
She might have had a period, I don't know.
Well, okay, so I think the first film ends on this very vital turning point where, she kind of defiantly stands up to him, and that's the kind of point where she becomes the dominant, and it's very clear to both of them what this relationship is going to be. So the second film should be about this new relationship. But, I want to keep in this idea that these are very complex issues and they're very real people, and they're sort of... People tend to work this stuff out by trial and error. That's why we have lots of failed relationships before we find the right person. She goes off, she's upset, she feels victimized, she feels sort of weak, and so she wants to reassert her sort of sense of dominance, and she wants to... So she needs some kind of fawning lackey that she can dominate. But she's got one. We established that in the first film. Her friend, what's the name of her friend who tries to get off with her, and she's like,
Jose.
Does she say no way to him?
So he's obviously just he'd do anything for her. He's her little friend zone guy. So she goes to him. She kind of anger fucks him, and then afterwards, she feels guilty about it. She's like, I feel like I used him. Probably shouldn't have done that. I might lead him on. But she realises that he absolutely loved it, and that's what he wanted as well. He wanted to be submissive. And she starts to understand how this all works. Because when she was from the other side of it, she didn't really get it. But now she's like, oh yeah, well, I slapped him around a bit. He liked that. That's good. So this develops into a full-blown dominant submissive relationship between the two of them. And then we can have some proper sex scenes. Not this bullshit. Putting an ice cube on someone's nipple is not BDSM, all right? This is let's get some cock and ball torture in there, all right? Let's have her trampling him in high heels or something, okay? Or she's use his mouth as an ashtray, all the good stuff.
A mouth as an ashtray? Well, that would hurt a bit.
Well, I'm not saying stub the cigarette on him. You just... Have you never seen this? God, don't you watch dominatrix porn? What's wrong with you?
No, I don't, actually.
So, yeah, Christian on his side, he goes back to the older woman, Mrs. Robinson. He goes back into his submissive role, which he realises is much more comfortable with that. But he's still carrying some sort of frustration and anger issues that he needs to get out. But he finds another outlet for these when a friend suggests he takes up kickboxing. And he finds that this gives him the physical release of adrenaline that he needed. And then the discipline of it helps him psychologically. It makes him feel he has kind of a purpose or a sort of routine. He realizes that he doesn't have to express all his psychoses through sex. And he finds a different outlet for it. Also, the advantage of that is he starts getting really shredded. and you get some proper abs on him, and you can start taking his shirt off more.
Ooh.
And we could have him fighting with people. We could have him like having a wrestling match with another guy. We'll put some more stuff like that in it. I mean, I basically want to make this film more sexy than the first one.
I think you should have a scene. He like goes to a bar purely with the intention of picking a fight with someone, and he ends up like pushing past a guy or something, and they end up having a fight, and he beats the shit out of him, and then he just like throws like a big wad of like money on him, and just like at the end like a big stack of $100 bills, and says like, clean yourself up or something, and like just walks off, readjusting his shirt.
Yeah, I think I would work. Yeah, very good. Okay, so I think ultimately we have to get them back together here now, don't we? With their newfound roles, they're more confident within these new positions. But there's nothing in the first film to suggest that there's any emotional connection between them whatsoever. Or that this relationship has to be purely sexual, and it's just an outlet for their physical desires. So Christian, he starts to pursue her again. He's sending her lots of expensive gifts and that sort of thing. He's trying to apologise. And with her newfound empowerment, she realises that she can use him and control him. And like she's like, "Oh, why? He's my puppy. Like, and he's rich as well, so I can just use him for all these great things." So they start seeing each other again, but now she's in charge, and so it kind of changes the dynamic of the relationship. And then a bewildered Canadian geese fly into them. That made as much sense there, Calvin, as it did in yours.
I stand by it.
So now they essentially have the same relationship, but she's in control. So she calls for the private helicopter to take them over to the sex house or whatever it's called. And then they still go to a fancy restaurant, have dinner, and he still pays. But now instead of him being like flashing his money back, going, "Oh, don't worry, darling, I'll take care of you," it's her saying, "You get me this, give me this, give me this." It's just the same thing, but with her in control, and they're both more comfortable with that. Sort of that's it really. But the setup for the final part, because it's a trilogy, the setup for what we're building to in the third film is that she uses her connections through Christian to create this high-class escort service for the most rich and powerful men in the world, and she ends up becoming a madam for a stable of dominatresses, which provide sexual domination to the majority of the world's politicians and business leaders.
Your use of the word stable. So I imagined a literal stable.
Well,
which they might go
ponies.
for. That's a bondage thing, isn't it?
Yeah, dress up as a pony. Yeah. You ever done that? Have you ever pretended to be any kind of animal during sex? Of course you have. We all know.
Well, I was gonna say does just wearing a saddle count?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay then.
What?
Calvin, if Kelsey Grammer sort of like said, "Come on over, I want to give you a good scene too," would you do it?
No, if you said, "Come on over, I want you to sign a contract."
I'd take out the fisting and
you fucking prude.
then sign it.
Is that libelous?
Well,
oh no, I'm not
Calvin.
implying that he's into fisting. No, that was just a funny joke that I was making reference to the film. When
He is though.
Anna takes.
He is. I've heard that he is. He loves a bit of fisting.
I've got a pitch, right? Okay, hear me out on this. Christian's dad falls over at work and breaks his hip and has to move in with Christian Grey, and then Christian's brother is suddenly really posh, and then they get this Mancunian housekeeper called Daphne. And,
but she sounds like no Mancunian.
And and then Christian gets a job as a radio host. And
I've got a pitch, and it's basically Frasier is cooking up some tossed salad and scrambled eggs, and then he cuts his finger and he goes, "Oh damn."
That was a really really good impression.
And he accidentally gets some blood in the food, so he doesn't want to eat it. So he goes to Niles and says, "Niles, I made you some breakfast." And Niles goes, "Oh, thank you, Frasier. Such a good brother." And he eats the eggs with Frasier. And then the title, it goes to one of those screens where it just has like writing on some text on a black screen, and it says something like "The early bird catches the worm" or something. and then that's my pitch.
Got silly quick, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah, after all the Kelsey Grammer lawsuits we're going to have.
Calvin, have you ever thought about Kelsey Grammer during sex?
Well, like sometimes you to keep the wolf from the door.
Thank you for listening, as always. We enjoyed breaking down 50 Shades of Grey a lot more than we expected to, and we'd be very interested to hear your take on it, and particularly in terms of what you expected before watching it to how you felt afterwards. You can talk to us at facebook.com/Diminishing Returns podcast, and if you like us on there, then you'll get all the new episodes as soon as they come out, as well as being able to join in the discussions we have. And join us next week when we're going back to the well to review the next film in our ongoing Bond series, Thunderball.
Tossed salad and scrambled eggs. They're coming again.
Scrambled eggs all over my face.
Aww.
What is a boy to do?
Filthy.